Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today on the Dungeon Dive, we are doing the top 10 solo games. And this list is specifically about board games and card games. Coming soon in the very near future, there will be a top 10 solo RPG systems/tools list, so stay tuned for that. So most of the games that I play on the Dungeon Dive are solo games, or at least I play them solo, even if they are not made for solo. That's just the way I prefer to play most of my board games these days. Even games like Runebound or Talisman, games that aren't specifically made for solo, I enjoy them more as a solo experience. For me, board gaming is primarily a solo hobby. I play some games with other people. I do have a small game group and we get together and we play more like Euro style games. But for thematic games, I like to play them solo. So most of the games that I cover on the Dungeon Dive are for solo play, or at least from a solo perspective. If I ever do cover a game that isn't made for solo or doesn't work well with solo, I will definitely say so. So this list today is focusing on games that are primarily made for solo play or games that I think are better when played solo. So let's get right to it. And coming in at number 10 is Dungeon Degenerates, The Hand of Doom. And that is from 2017, designed by Eric Ratty and Sean Auberg and published by Gablinko. So Dungeon Degenerates is such a fantastic game. Even in this sea of amazing games that we have, Dungeon Degenerates still feels unique. There really is nothing like Dungeon Degenerates. It is absolutely overflowing with theme. It's a very confident game. I'm still surprised that this is the first game that these guys ever made together. It feels like something that would be made by a seasoned vet towards the end of their career. But these guys just came straight out of the gate and made this incredible game with tight mechanisms and a great rule book and just a world that just oozes atmosphere around every single corner. You are playing as Dungeon Degenerates, and that is the key word here. The game is very subversive. There's alcohol. There are drugs that you can take to make yourself stronger. Your characters are ne'er-do-wells. They're murderers. They're thieves. This world is just kind of nasty, and that is one thing that I've heard people register as a complaint is some of the imagery invokes some of that fascist. It uses some of that fascist icons. And rest assured, Sean Auberg is not some fascist. He's not some Nazi guy. That is just stems from the school of art that he is from. This old kind of punk and punk metal aesthetic. This underground art was everything about it was supposed to be subversive and edgy and dangerous. And Dungeon Degenerates just captures that perfectly. I love all of the combat encounters are unique. All of the monsters are unique with special powers and art. The non-combat encounters are super interesting. There are a lot of choices. Now, the reason why I think this is better as a solo game, and you will see this trend in at least the first 3 games we talk about today, but in Dungeon Degenerates, the players, when playing multiplayer, they're working as a single unit. You are working as a party. It's not recommended to split off because it throws the balance off, and you really are moving around the map as a single unit. And so there aren't a lot of decision points for other players to give their input. As a single party unit, you really are playing a solo game that other people can participate in. So for me, Dungeon Degenerates works best as a solo game where I can control the entire party. I like to play with 2 or 3 degenerates and go at it from there. The main reason why this game isn't lower on or isn't higher on my list is because it is mission-based and campaign-based. The campaigns aren't long and the missions aren't very long, but I wish there was a way to play the game where I could just set everything up and play like a monster hunting mode or a boss hunting mode. And I'm trying to develop one. If I can ever just take the time to do it, I could probably put something together in a day or so. That would be really fun to play. But if anybody knows of anything like that already, let me know, because I would like to get Dungeon Degenerates to the table more often. But yeah, I find the world in Dungeon Degenerates just so much fun to be in and to inhabit and to experience on the table. It gives me an experience like no other game does. Okay, and coming in at number 9 is Sleeping Gods from 2021. And that is, of course, designed with art by Ryan Lockett and published by Red Raven Games. Again, this is another game where all of the players, if you are playing multiplayer, are working together as a single unit. You have 9 crewmen on this ship, and you are working together as a single crew. I played this game with the group, and for me, it kind of fell flat. I love it as a solo game, though, because I like controlling my 9 crewmen as a single crew, as a single unit. And I just find the game really shines when you play it as a solo game. This is another game like Dungeon Degenerates, where the world itself is really the highlight. And one of the reasons why the world is the highlight is because of the writing in the game. The writing is really strong. I read a lot of novels and a lot of short stories. I have something like 500 books in my to read pile. So a lot of times when there is a narrative-driven campaign in board games, the writing itself, the prose fiction, falls flat because it's written by people who aren't professional authors. It's written by game designers, and their strength isn't prose fiction. Their strength is making games. And often the prose fiction of a game just doesn't really work for me, but it works for me in Sleeping Gods. And one of the reasons why it works for me is because the paragraphs are pretty short, so you're not spending a ton of time reading in between turns. I also find the map just an absolute joy to explore. I love all of the random encounters that you can have with the inhabitants of this fantastic nautical fantasy themed world. The creatures are interesting, all of the different races and ancestries that are scattered about all of these islands, the different places, the different people you can interact with. It always creates these really just unique situations from one turn to the next. Now, the combat can be a little puzzly and quite difficult. There is a combat encounter right at the very start of the game that you can hit as your first encounter that can completely wipe out your entire party against these 2 kind of weird panther type things. And it can really throw a monkey wrench in your fun, that is for sure. And so I think when I play the game going forward, I'm going to use the easy rules that Ryan Lockett developed after the game was released. And even though this is a campaign game, it is a short campaign, and you're meant to play the campaign over and over again to gain experience and to gain knowledge of the world. This is a game where the knowledge you have as a player about the world makes each subsequent run through the campaign a little faster and a little easier because you know where to go. And it is the only campaign game, the only narrative campaign game that I have played multiple times. So yes, that was Sleeping Gods. Okay, number 8. Coming in at number 8 is Hexplore, the Valley of the Dead King from 2017. And that is from Kat Kamundry, Nathan Luz, and Jonathan Mariucci, and published by Mariucci Designs LLC. Again, this is another game where the players are moving together as a single unit. And so for me, that just translates to this is a solo game. I like playing this game as a party of 2 heroes. I think that's where the game, for me, works the best. Although it is entirely possible to play this game as a lone wolf, as a single hero. It can be very difficult, but it can be done because if you start adding in the expansions, there are these really powerful classes and races that you can combine to make a super, super heroic character. But this game gives me the feel of a kind of Bethesda open world RPG like Fallout or like Elder Scrolls. This is a huge, wide open sandbox of a hex crawl with adventure and encounters around every single corner. However, it's a confined sandbox because it is a board game, but that means I don't have to bring as much to the table as I would in a solo RPG hex crawl. The adventure is somewhat defined for me within these parameters of that box. But I love all of the different race and class combinations. And once you start adding in the other games in the series, then all of those races and classes can be used in any other of the volumes. And so you end up, each game that you buy ends up expanding the previous games, and that is awesome. I love all of the different boss fights and just that wide open sandbox nature. No other board game gives me that sandbox hex crawl feel like Hexplore it does. And I like Valley of the Dead King the most because it is the most simple and the most direct. Okay, so coming in at number 7, and this is the first game where you aren't controlling the characters as a single party, and that is Machina Arcana 3rd edition from 2019, and that is designed by Uri Billick, and that is published by Adrema Games. So Machina Arcana is this it's in a steampunk setting, but with a Cthulhu mythos theme. And I love the marriage of those two things in this game. The world of Machina Arcana is very creepy. I love the map tiles. They create a sense of dread and darkness and griminess, and it's like this mossy, gooey interior. I just love the look of those tiles. Every time I place a new tile that I am exploring, my imagination just gets triggered. Like, oh man, I would not want to be in this situation. The way that I like to play this game the most is with 2 explorers. I think playing 2 in this game is you can create some good complementary characters. You know, you can have one character who can focus on physical conflict and then another character who can focus on mental conflict and things like that. And you can make some good balanced parties with only 2 heroes and 2 explorers. And I think the game balances well at that level. Actually, I think Machina Arcana does a good job of balancing at all hero levels, at all player counts. But 2 is where I like to play it the most. I think the writing and the theme are very, very good in Machina Arcana. A friend of the channel, Andy Lennon, he did some of the writing on the expansion stuff, and the expansion writing is fantastic. It has that really thick purple prose that is so popular with weird fiction and pulp fiction, and that style that I personally am a huge fan of. And it's just dripping with theme, and there are all kinds of creepy monsters, and the loot is super interesting because it's like this steampunky. You're tinkering with your loot, and so you can combine loot to make better loot. And there are different ways to interact with the tiles, so you can interact with these workbenches and treasure chests, and you can set traps for the monsters. It's pretty strategic and tactical. You do really need to think about how you are engaging the enemy, how you are positioned on the map. So in that sense, for me, sometimes it can be a little difficult. It's not just a go in guns blazing game, but I love Machina Arcana. It's really, really great. The games can go a little long, and there's not really a good way to save. It's not a campaign, but you're working through kind of like short stories or novellas. Rather than a novel length campaign, these are short story length campaigns. And playing with solo, that's another reason why I enjoy this game solo, is I can just get up from the table when I'm done playing, leave, and come back to it another day. You really can't do that when you are playing with other players. So that is number 7, Machina Arcana. Okay, coming in at number 6, I think this is the first game with designed with solo in mind. And that is Mini Rogue from 2021. And that is designed by Paolo Di Stefano and Gabriel Gendron and published by Nuts Publishing. So Mini Rogue, like the name suggests, is a rogue style RPG on your table. So for those of you who don't know, really quickly, Rogue was a popular computer dungeon crawl way back in the day, Rogue and Netscape, where you played as a little ASCII sign, a little @ sign. It was all ASCII art. And you would just go from 0 to hero. You would try to go through as many floors of a dungeon as you could without dying. And once you died, you started over at ground 0. And, that spawned a whole bunch of imitators and a whole new subgenres of rogue likes and rogue lights. And those are super popular today. And I love those kinds of video games. And so Mini Rogue, it gives me that experience on the table. I love the art in Mini Rogue. It reminds me of Samurai Jack era Cartoon Network art with this kind of flat cell shaded look. It looks fantastic. The cards are super well designed. I love the UI in the game. Everything looks really clean. It's easy to read. It's a super easy game to learn and set up. It takes up almost no space at all. You can play it on a small TV tray, which is fantastic. The base game and all of the expansions fit in that small box. And there's a lot of variety in there. And there are a few different characters you can play. There's all kinds of different encounters, both combat and non-combat. It just really does pack a full, complete game into that small box. It plays quickly, and once you're done, you can have a new game set up in a matter of seconds. And that's something that I really do appreciate. And it's something that you people who have been watching the Dungeon Dive for a long time have seen me gravitate more towards these smaller and more simple games. And Mini Rogue is a perfect example of that kind of game. Okay, now coming in at number 5, and just one step up from Mini Rogue, but a very similar game, and that is Iron Helm from 2019, designed by Jason Glover and produced by Grey Gnome Games. So Iron Helm is designed specifically for solo play, and it uses Jason Glover's, patented mechanism. It's not patented, but I call it this or that and press your luck. And this is a thing that is in most of his games where he gives the players choices. You can choose the thing you know, the devil you know. You can choose the devil you don't know. But if you do, you're pressing your luck. And I love that design ethos. I love having those choices. And you're just, oh man, I could go to the left path and face a monster that I know I could probably defeat, but I'm really looking for this treasure. And I haven't come across the treasure yet on this adventure. Should I chance it and go down that right path? And you press your luck and you do, and you flip the card over, and oh my God, you've been ambushed. And it's a super powerful ambush. And I love that it creates tension in the game. Iron Helm is one of the better games I know of that marriages theme and mechanisms together to create this cohesive package. Because in the game, you are playing as a seasoned veteran adventurer who is going on one more quest to get the gold they need to retire. So you aren't busting down doors, running in with youthful energy, swords swinging, axes swinging, spells casting. You are taking your time. You are collected. You are weighing your options. And that transcends from the theme to the way the player has to interact with the game. And that's masterful. That doesn't happen a lot in this space. And with all of the expansions, so Iron Helm was a game that I liked enough with the base game to invest in all of the expansions. And I'm so glad that I did, because with the expansions, you have dozens of heroes, a big stack of loot, all kinds of different plot cards. You have a whole bunch of different skills from the different characters. You have all of these modules that you can work through that are specifically themed for a certain kind of adventure. I have a whole video that goes into super detail about everything you get with Iron Helm, and the art is amazing. Jason Glover's art is fantastic, and his art just keeps getting better. The new expansion that's coming out soon with the new dungeon cards, that art on that is it's like next level. So yeah. Iron Helm is a fantastic game. Okay, coming in at number 4, we're returning to the realm of the bigger box. But this is kind of a big small box, or a smaller big box, something like that. It's not a huge box, but that is A Touch of Evil, the supernatural game from 2008. And of course, designed by Jason C. Hill and Flying Frog Productions. So the frogs are kind of the reigning kings, the champions of this kind of super thematic Ameritrash style board game, and I love so many of their games. And a lot of their earlier games, the rules were made specifically, or more specifically, more focused on a competitive mode, and that's true with A Touch of Evil, but they also included co-op and solo rules, which worked pretty well. And I think they do work pretty well with a group, but the reason why I like to play A Touch of Evil solo with three heroes is because of the theme and the atmosphere. I like being in control of how into the world of the game I get. And with other players around the table, I find that I can get distracted and I lose a connection to what is happening on the table. And because A Touch of Evil is kind of a creepy game, it has that really cool kind of 60s and 70s British horror or gothic horror vibe that you might find in a Hammer House of Horrors or in any of the Amicus productions, any of their anthologies. Something like a Plague of Zombies. That this game captures the mood of a Plague of Zombies perfectly. And so I like to lose myself in that world, and I just find that it's easier if I do that on my own. I can dim the lights and turn on some creepy music, and there's not going to be anybody there to distract me with jokes. I'll be the only one distracting myself with bad jokes. But I love A Touch of Evil. There are so many characters that once you add in the expansions, you have a huge kind of expansive map, but it does still fit on a small table. There are all kinds of different bosses to fight, like Headless Horsemen and Scarecrows and a Cthulhu-esque creature or pirate ship that is haunting the coastline. Yeah, just so much theme. All of the different areas on the map, each of the named areas has its own encounter deck where you can get allies, you can be ambushed by monsters and by people. Yeah, you can find different items. And then you have that whole town elder mechanism where the people of Shadowbrook have secrets, and you have to like suss out who's a suspect and who might be able to help you in that final battle. Just a fantastic game and such a fun solo game. So coming in at number 3 is another small game, a game designed for solo in mind. And this is the second Game Crafter game on the list. The first was Iron Helm, and this one is now Rogue Dungeon from 2020. And that was designed by Albert Danish, Chad Menachia, and John Smith, and that is from Cerberus Gate Games. However, they just had a successful Kickstarter, so this will be available outside of Game Crafter. So hopefully it will be available to more people around the world, because I know Game Crafter games are pretty hard to get outside of the United States, and they can be very expensive. So hopefully this is bringing the cost down for people. But Rogue Dungeon, like the name suggests, from Mini Rogue, this is a rogue style zero to hero run based game where you are taking a hero and you are going into a dungeon trying to get down, I think it's to the 5th level of the dungeon, and beat the final boss, and game over. No campaign, no story, just pure focus on dungeon crawling. There are a whole bunch of different heroes, and the heroes all have different skills that you have to kind of use like a resource to trigger at the most opportune moments on your adventure. There's a huge stack of loot that you can use that can help you upgrade your stats. There are level ups. And one of the things that this game does better than most other small card-based dungeon crawls is it does a very good job of creating a sense of space. Because as you work through these little dungeon cards going from node to node, you have to work out how you are moving through the dungeon. And there are certain nodes that every time you pass over them, you have to trigger whatever is in that room. So there are persistent traps or persistent creatures that you have to overcome. And it feels like a big dungeon crawl game, but put down onto a small area that you can play on a TV tray. And it's just a fantastic game. It's super difficult. There is a lot of there's enough of variety, barely. I think the game could use a little more variety, but not too much more, because like Iron Helm, that the knowledge of what you have encountered and what is left to encounter is really important in determining how well you are going to do at the game. So I would like to see just a few more cards in each of the decks, and I think that is coming with this new Kickstarter version of the game. But yeah, Rogue Dungeon is fantastic. The creature art is super cool. It looks like old kind of art from cutscenes in the PS1 and PS2 video game days. The overall graphic design of the game can use some work, and I think they are working on that on this new version of the game. So that was number 3 with Rogue Dungeon. Okay, and coming in at number 2 is another Game Crafter game. Yeah, I love these little Game Crafter games. What can I say? But number 2 is, of course, Quest for the Lost Pixel from 2015. And that is from Peter Jank and Gummy Bear Factory Games. So Quest for the Lost Pixel really is 0 to hero perfection. Quest for the Lost Pixel is Rogue on your table. It is analog Rogue. It is analog Tangle Deep. It is analog NetHack on your table. With all the expansions, the game is just overflowing with variety. If variety is the spice of life, then Quest for the Lost Pixel is the Carolina ghost pepper of board games. I don't know. I don't know if those are super spicy peppers anymore. I know they're always like making new spicier things, but yeah, it's a spicy game. There is so much to see and do. There are dungeons within dungeons. There's a fishing mini game. There's a pressure luck mini game. There are cheat codes that you can unlock with a little Yahtzee mini game. There are dozens and dozens of characters that you can level up and have subclasses. There are pets. Each floor of the dungeon, you're working through 10 floors of the dungeon. Each floor of the dungeon has its own deck of monsters, its own deck of loot. There is an unidentified loot deck for when you find an unidentified item. You can take that back to the blacksmith and identify it, and hopefully you get something really great. But hey, you might find that thing you found is actually just some rotten meat. There are a ton of spells and gems that you can use in order to trigger these special powers. There's a whole town and settlement phase in between the dungeons now where you can build different buildings that will give you certain powers, and they will also unlock victory points. So you can kind of turn this into an arcade score chasing game. Yeah, the game it's the amount of game contained in that box once you add everything is unparalleled. I love the game. It's super simple. You can have it set up for the amount of stuff. You can have it set up very quickly and put away very quickly. The games can go a little long, but one thing I enjoy is that if you want to play just 5 levels, instead of going from levels 1 through 10, you can just go through levels 1 through 5. And it's a perfect game. It's really made for solo, I think. And just playing one hero and just going in and seeing how good you can do. And it's a game that I always have fun with. And that is so important. A lot of games demand a lot from the players, demand a lot from me. And Quest for the Lost Pixel demands nothing. And I just set it up and I just have fun. And that's one of the best things I can say about a board game. The negative is, yes, it is very, very expensive. It's only available on Game Crafter. Peter Jank will not do a crowdfund. He doesn't want to do that for his games. Yeah, it's a lot of work, and I don't blame him. He made this game just for him and his friends, and it just so happened to become popular outside of his little core group of people. And it became very popular with the Dungeon Dive group. And but what I would say is, if you're getting into these kinds of games and you like these kinds of roguelike experiences, there are a few games that scratch that itch. But you could take the money that you would spend on all of those and combine it together and just get Quest for the Lost Pixel. Just invest in the best version of that game straight out of the gate. And that way you just have the best one. And I don't think you will be disappointed if that is what you are looking for. Okay, and now coming in at number 1, probably no surprise, my favorite game of all time is also my favorite solo game. And that is Secrets of the Lost Tomb from 2015, designed by Christopher Batarlis and Jim Sammartino, and published by Everything Epic Games. Now, the biggest drawback of this game has been that it's been out of print for a long time, and the expansions are super expensive and hard to get. But that should be alleviated. That problem should be solved, because September 2023, the game will be available on some crowdfunding. I'm not sure who they're using. I don't think it's Kickstarter. But the game will be available again And let's talk about that real quick. People have been asking me if I'm excited. I'm excited for people who don't have the game yet, so they will be able to experience this game that I absolutely love, that I'm always constantly talking about. I'm excited for them. I don't know if I'm going to back it. I don't know how many changes they're going to make. I don't know if any of the new things they will add will be compatible with what I already have. And what I already have is, for me, the perfect game. I wouldn't change a thing about Secrets of the Lost Tomb if I were to re-release it. I know some people don't like the art. It is a little ugly, but for me, it's kind of the charm of this huge, just messy Ameritrash pulp adventure game that it doesn't look great, but I kind of like that. It's kind of part of its charm. I hope they don't try to fix it. I hope they don't try to streamline it. I hope they don't turn it into a new version of Secrets of the Lost Station, which that was one of my most disappointing games of all time because of how much I like Lost Tomb. And the reason why I like Lost Tomb is there is no throttle on what I can experience as a player. And on my very first turn, I have access to everything in the game. I could stumble upon the most powerful weapon in the game on my very first turn. I could unleash 3 epic enemies on my first full turn of exploring the map. You never know what you're going to discover, and that is part of the fun of the game. As a solo game, I like this more as a solo game because of the way it is balanced. And I use the word balance very loosely. In Secrets of the Lost Tomb, there are 12 actions that you divvy up amongst the players or the heroes or the explorers, survivors. I can't remember what they're called. But if you're playing with 4, then each player or each hero gets 3 actions. But if you're playing with 2, each hero gets 6 actions. And so you can have these huge, super epic turns where you can do 6 really cool things on a turn. And also, if you start with 2 survivors or 2 explorers, heroes, you also get to start with 2 companions. And so on your very first turn, you are going in to this pulp adventure in this magical tomb with 2 decked out heroes with their own abilities, with their own weapons. Each one of them has 2 companions who could add weapons and who can add abilities. And then you also get 6 turns where you can explore all over. You can fill up like half your table with tiles just on your first turn. And the huge stack of tiles that you have add all kinds of different random elements and traps. And there are different things to explore. You can find different shortcuts. You can unlock different relics. The scenarios are interesting for the most part. There's this really cool scenario just in the base box that you are dealing with the Herald of Cthulhu, and it has all kinds of choose your own adventure elements. And yeah, just, man, Secrets of the Lost Tomb has everything I look for in a game. Stat tests and checks and traps. It has a huge deck of random encounters that are non-combat focused, with adventures on one side where you have a good chance of something good happening to you, and then misadventures on the other side where you're trying to prevent something bad from happening to you. Every time I play the game, I like it more. I just played through a game last weekend, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. It's my favorite game, and it's my favorite game to play solo. So, all right, you guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this top 10 solo board and card game list, and we will talk to you later. Bye bye.